rising and it has to keep rising just because you have an excess supply of goods.
Our economy has three basic things that govern it. One is fractional reserve banking, banks printing money out of nothing. It's also based upon compound interest. When you borrow money, you have to pay back more than you borrowed, which means that you, in effect, create money out of thin air.
There are really only two things anyone needs to know about the monetary system. All money is created out of debt. Money is monetized debt. If all outstanding debt was to be repaid right now, there would not be $1 in circulation. Interest is charged on virtually all loans made, and the money needed to pay back this interest does not exist in the money supply outright. So, if all this debt was to be repaid right now, not only would there not be $1 left in circulation, there would also be a gigantic amount of money owed that is literally impossible to pay back, for it does not exist.
The economic paradigm we live in now is a Ponzi scheme. Nothing grows forever.
The consequence of all of this is that two things are inevitable: inflation and bankruptcy.
People are basically vehicles to just create money, which must create more money to keep the whole thing from falling apart, which is what's happening right now.
So one might ask, where did this all begin of what we have today? John Locke introduces property, and he has three provisos for just private right and property. That there must be enough left over for others, and that you must not let it spoil, and that you, most of all, must mix your labor with it. Well, he drops them. He drops them like that. He says, well, once the introduction of money came in by men's tacit consent, and he doesn't say all the provisos are canceled, erased, but that's what happens. So money buys labor now. There's no longer consideration of whether there's enough left over for others. There's no longer consideration of whether it spoils, but it fits the interests of capital owners. Then Adam Smith comes along, and what his big idea is, how do we have supply equaling demand or demand equaling supply? How can they come into equilibrium? And he says it's the invisible hand of the market that brings them into equilibrium. So now we have God as actually immanent. Now we have the system itself as God.
Adam Smith never fathomed that the most profitable economic sector on the planet would eventually be in the arena of financial trading, where money itself is simply gained by the movement of other money in an arbitrary game which holds zero productive merit to society. Money is treated as a commodity in and of itself. The underlying idea, which was mysteriously qualified by Adam Smith with his religious declaration of the invisible hand, is that the narrow, self-interested pursuit of this fictional commodity will somehow magically manifest human and social well-being and progress.
It's got to be the most bizarre delusion in the history of human thought.
What is it that keeps our economic system going? Consumption. Or more accurately, cyclical consumption. We are left with a pattern of monetary exchange that simply cannot be allowed to stop or even substantially slowed, if the society as we know it is to remain operational.
The American dream is based on rampant consumerism. We have to have X number of material possessions and the possibility of gaining infinitely more material possessions in order to be happy. That's just not true.
There is one consequence that runs through the entire machine: inequality.
Never ever make the mistake of being poor.
It's not just one or two things that go wrong as inequality increases. It seems to be everything, whether we're talking about crime or health or mental illness or whatever.
Food, clothing, shelter, warmth, love, all those things are necessary. If you deprive people of any of them, you have a lesser human being, less capable of functioning.
Gandhi saw this. He said the deadliest form of violence is poverty.
People ask if I'm a socialist or a communist or a capitalist, and I say I'm none of the above. All of those political constructs were created by writers who assumed that we lived on a planet of infinite resources. Not a one of those political philosophies even contemplates that there might be a shortage of anything.
World oil production right now is about 86 million barrels a day. Over 10 years, you're looking at roughly 40 million barrels a day having to be replaced. There's nothing around which can even within a 1% of meeting that sort of demand.
Oil is the foundation of, and it is present throughout the edifice of human civilization.
The arrival of this cheap, easy energy, which is equivalent, by the way, to billions of slaves working around the clock, changed the world in such a radical way over the last century, and the population has gone up 10 times.
If we don't do something pretty quickly, there's going to be a huge energy deficiency.
But by 2050, oil supply is able to support less than half the present world's population in their present way of life. So the scale of adjustment to live differently is just enormous. And the governments who are driven by these economists who don't really appreciate what we're talking about are trying to stimulate consumerism to restore past prosperity in the hope that they can restore the past. They're printing yet more money lacking any collateral at all.
I think that's something our grandchildren will look back on with total disbelief. You people knew that you were dealing with a finite commodity. How could you possibly have built your economy around something which was going to disappear?
Are there solutions to replace the edifice of the hydrocarbon economy? Of course. But the path needed to accomplish these changes will not manifest through the market system protocols required. If there's no monetary incentive, things do not happen.
This system is more wasteful than all the other existing systems in the history of the planet. Every level of life organization and life system is in a state of crisis and challenge and decay or collapse.
It exists as a never-ending, self-referring, self-rationalizing circle of discourse where universal human need, natural resources, or any form of physical life-supporting efficiency is ruled out by default.
So it's a system disorder, and the system disorder seems to be fatal.
And when things get so bad that people lose confidence in their elected leaders, they will demand change if we don't kill each other in the process or destroy the environment. I'm just afraid that we might get to the point of no return.
In a society which is predicated on competition, the profiteering of other people's problems, the ruling ideology will very often justify that behavior by appeals to some fundamental and unalterable human nature. So the myth in our society is that people are competitive by nature and that they're individualistic and that they're selfish. We have a human need for companionship and for close contact, to be loved, to be attached to be accepted, to be seen, to be received for who we are. If those needs are met, we develop into people who are compassionate, cooperative, and who have empathy for other people.